you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement. Crew access arm retraction started.
There you see a live view of the crew access arm retracting away from Crew Dragon in preparation for launch. The countdown clock continues to tick, and we're now at T-minus 42 minutes and 33 seconds. We're standing by for the completion of the crew access retraction. This is one of the last major visual milestones that we'll see in preparation for liftoff. Shortly thereafter, we should hear the call out that the launch escape system is armed, and from there, we'll hear that Falcon 9 prop load has started, which is one of my favorite milestones of the launch countdown.
We just saw a beautiful shot from inside the White Room as the crew arm was moving away. There it is. The capsule, you can just barely see it in the corner now of that opening where that is where the side hatch was. Where the astronauts ingress Dragon, and now you can see it continuing to swing away from the Falcon 9 rocket and Crew Dragon Endeavour in preparation for launch. That is a really cool angle. And Tracy, as we're watching the crew arm still retracting here, we are about to have the International Space Station fly over us, right?
We are, yes, here at KSC, Kennedy Space Center. It looks like in another minute to the southeast, traveling across east-northeast. The station should be visible overhead.
Crew access arm retraction complete.
Now we just heard confirmation that the crew access arm is done retracting.
Up next, we'll expect to hear a call to arm the launch escape system.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for Section 7. Close visors and arm launch escape system.
Copy. SpaceX Endeavour visors are down.
Copy, visors down.
Okay, so the crew there reporting that they have closed and locked their visors in place in preparation for the launch escape system arming. The launch escape system is a critical safety feature. This is something that the shuttle did not have. We take very seriously the fact that the astronauts' lives are in our hands, and we take every measure possible to ensure that the crew has options and has an escape in the worst of scenarios. So this is simply a path to safety for the crew in the event that they need to depart the pad in an emergency, and also applies to aborting the mission even after liftoff and through ascent.
And the Crew Dragon Endeavour actually has an enhanced abort capability now. That was one of the improvements made to this capsule after Demo 2, and it increased the propulsion system on Dragon.
Launch escape system is verified armed.
Okay, so that was confirmation that the launch escape system is armed. And so that is what we have to hear before fueling on the Falcon 9 rocket can begin. So we are about just under 4 minutes away from that milestone. But again, we were saying the propulsion system. Oh, there's a shot of the space station. There it is.
Yeah.
Everybody wave.
They're waving down at us. I think they're watching right now. So
They are. You know they are.
yeah, hi
yes.
guys.
Hi.
We see you. So that's super cool. But yeah, the abort system, it's been improved by about 10%. That's the Super Draco thrusters. There's 8 of them built directly into the Crew Dragon, and so that actually allowed for a wider margin in terms of wind speeds. So there's greater opportunities for launch. But weather not looking like much of a concern at all today. In fact, last we heard there's less than 5% chance of violation. So more than 95% go conditions, which is great.
Yeah. Pretty rare for launches from here.
Yes. And that launch escape system, how that works is once the fueling begins at T-minus 35 minutes, if there's any kind of emergency, Crew Dragon can launch itself off the top of the Falcon 9 rocket, and then it would splash down under parachutes off the coast in the Atlantic, and we have rescue teams pre-positioned in the event of an emergency if that happens, which is highly unlikely, but it's something the NASA and SpaceX and Department of Defense teams practice for extensively. That launch escape system is also equipped to perform an abort after liftoff. We would call that an in-flight launch escape, and that can happen at any point throughout the ascent trajectory.
Yeah, we actually tested this launch escape system in multiple ways. We performed a pad abort test where a Dragon capsule was on the pad and simulated an abort where it took off like a rocket like you've never seen and deployed parachutes and splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean. We also conducted an in-flight abort test, which was incredible to witness. I mean, it was a test unlike any other that we'd performed before, and where we launched a Falcon 9 rocket with a Dragon on top, and about 100 seconds into flight, simulated an anomaly. Dragon took off and deployed parachutes, splashed down, and so this is a system that we have tested, but never expect to utilize. Once again, the booster that you're looking at now, if you're wondering why it looks a little dirty, that is actually soot that was left from reentry after its last mission. This particular booster supported the Crew-1 mission very recently, and we have, there we can see a photo of our Crew-2 astronauts. Actually, they're holding up their fingers because they have soot. They signed their initials, their names into the soot there in the background. So I've said before, I love the human spaceflight traditions that we have, and I think this is a new one. Tracy, you said it earlier.
Yeah. We never got to draw on the shuttle before we launched, so this is kind of cool.
Yeah, Thomas, they were answering questions about it, and he started to say we carved our initials, and he quickly stopped himself. No, we didn't carve anything into the Falcon 9. We traced our initials in the side of the rocket, and so you could see closely in that photo. If you look, you could see the initials of each astronaut. So that's really cool and something that we look forward to seeing on future reused boosters. This one is set to land.
Load has started.
Okay, we just heard confirmation that fueling has begun on the Falcon 9 rocket. And this first stage booster is set to land on a SpaceX drone ship at sea after liftoff. We are now at T-minus 34 minutes, 30 seconds and counting from Crew Dragon's third launch with astronauts and the first for 2021. Today begins the next 6-month rotation mission to the International Space Station. The launch escape system is armed, which happened just before fueling began at T-minus 35 minutes. The Dragon capsule was loaded with propellants about a week and a half ago, just a few miles down the road at what we call Dragon Land. And in order to fly, Dragon needs a fuel and an oxidizer. And Kate, I'll let you talk more about the fuel.
Yeah, so for that fuel, we use monomethylhydrazine, or MMH, and nitrogen tetroxide, or NTO, for the oxidizer. Together, these two propellants feed the Draco engines that maneuver Dragon on orbit, as well as the 8 Super Draco engines that would power the launch escape system in an abort scenario.
And again, now that the fueling is underway on Falcon 9, that means the 8 Super Draco engines built directly into Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to launch the capsule off of the Falcon 9 rocket in an instant, should there be any kind of emergency associated with the rocket or the launch pad. The NASA and SpaceX teams have trained extensively for exactly that type of contingency, along with the Department of Defense Detachment 3, who does a fantastic job in those training scenarios. Now over to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne for an operations update. John?
We are counting down those final minutes, and everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon for an on-time launch just under 33 minutes from now. Falcon 9 did begin propellant loading just a couple of minutes ago. We heard it. Now, the first and second stages of Falcon 9 are each loaded with 2 liquid propellants. One is fuel. That's loaded into the tank at the bottom of each stage. The other is an oxidizer, and that goes obviously into the tank at the top of each stage. Now, the fuel that we use to power the Merlin engines is a refined kerosene called RP1. And the oxidizer loaded on each stage is densified liquid oxygen called LOX. Densified means that it is kept much colder than typical for launch vehicles, and it takes up less volumes. So this allows us to get more oxidizer loaded onto the first and second stages. Now, to ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called T-tub. When T-tub comes in contact with oxygen, it burns, and it gives off a green-colored flame. Now, once we've got the flame going, we add the kerosene fuel into the Merlin chamber, and the engine ramps up to full power. You might see the green flash just as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation. Now, currently, we've just begun. The first stage fuel tank is about right now a little under 10% full. The first stage is the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle you see on your screen, the white cylinder topped off by the black cylinder. That makes up the first stage. And then the top 1/3 underneath the Dragon capsule, that's our second stage. Now, at this time, the second stage fuel tank is about 8% full. Now, the fuel tank, if you were to zoom in, that's where the NASA meatball logo is positioned, and right above it you can just make out the red NASA worm logo, and that's where the liquid oxygen tank is on the second stage, and there's a closer view. Now, in addition to loading the fuel, we're also loading oxygen, the liquid oxygen, onto the first stage. We won't start liquid oxygen loading on the second stage until T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds.
Start of stage 1 cryo.
And liquid oxygen will continue loading on both stages until the last few minutes of the countdown. Helium loading into pressure vessels is also underway. We use that to pressurize the tanks in flight as the propellant is pulled out by the Merlin turbopumps. On board the Dragon spacecraft, you can see here in a close-up, the astronauts are monitoring systems while the propellant is loaded into the Falcon 9. The crew training in the simulator included playback of sounds that we've recorded in the Dragon capsule during recent flights. So they get an idea what all that hissing and popping and banging is from the vent valves and the pressurization systems. Now, the range continues to report no problems. They are go to support launch. And the weather also looks good. I mentioned the T-minus 1 hour briefing. We called it fantastic. Currently, we don't have anything that we are tracking that could be a concern. We have a very small possibility of a pop-up rain shower, but nothing showing up. So right now, 29 minutes, 40 seconds ago, it looks like we've got good weather. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window. So at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity coming in 3 days. So right now, let's turn it back over to Jesse and Gary for an overview of events that are going to happen after the liftoff of Falcon 9.
Great news, John. For Crew-2, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 23 hours, and their journey will be fairly similar to the trip Crew-1 made in November of last year.
All right, as we wait T0 in just about 29 minutes, the ground operations teams are doing a series of systems checks to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. You're looking at a live view of our teams at the Cape as they prepare for liftoff. As we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, we wanted to give you an overview of what the ascent portion of the mission will look like.
Once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent.
At about 50 seconds into the flight, Falcon 9 engines will throttle up to help pass through the period of maximum dynamic pressure on the rocket, or what we typically refer to as max Q. It's worth noting that once we hit max Q, the vehicle will be going supersonic.
Once we are through the period of maximum dynamic pressure, we can throttle up our 9 Merlin engines again. And from there, at about 2.5 minutes into flight, we have a series of 3 events that will happen in rapid succession.
First is MECO, or main engine cutoff. This is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines shut off in preparation for stage separation, which is our second event. This is where the first stage detaches from the second stage, with the first stage making its way back to Earth for landing as the second stage continues on its journey with the third event. SES-1, or second stage engine start number 1, is where the MVAC engine lights up and propels the second stage, along with our Crew-2 astronauts, to orbit.
As Stage 2 heads towards its targeted drop-off orbit, Stage 1 will execute 2 burns in order to make its way back to Earth. The first is the entry burn, where 3 of the 9 M1D engines will reignite and then shut down. And this helps to slow the stage down in preparation for entry back into the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
While the first stage is heading back to Earth, the second stage will cut off its 1 Merlin engine that was ignited right after stage separation. Once this happens, we'll wait for confirmation of a good orbital insertion.
About 90 seconds after Dragon gets into orbit, Falcon 9 will land back on Earth. The landing burn is just a single-engine burn, powerful enough to bring the vehicle's speed down rapidly in order to land on the drone ship about 9.5 minutes into the mission.
While Falcon 9 first stage is landing, Dragon is preparing to separate from the second stage. At about 3 minutes after the second stage gets into orbit, we should have a great view of Dragon with its 4-person crew drifting away from the second stage. Once Dragon is a short distance away, it will begin checking out its Draco maneuvering thrusters to make sure Dragon continues to increase separation distance from the second stage. It's worth noting that these are not the Super Draco engines that would be used during an abort scenario.
About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin. It will take roughly 4 minutes for the nose cone hooks to unlatch and open, exposing its guidance navigation controls, or what we call GNC, that will help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
And lastly, once the nose cone is deployed, the remaining Draco thrusters on the forward bulkhead will be checked. From there, over the next 23-plus hours, Dragon will be in its rendezvous and approach phases, undergoing a number of phasing burns as it makes its way to station. All of that will be coming up soon. For now, let's check back in with Courtney in Mission Control Houston. Courtney.
Thanks, Gary. The space station team here in Houston is focused, and the critical systems on the station continue to function normally. The teams have verified the command path from the ground through our constellation of communication satellites to the station. Everything is nominal.